Hello, my name is Codruta Sintionean, and I'm one of the 4 editors of Invented Traditions in North and South Korea, together with Andrew David Jackson, Remco Breuker, and Sedarbo Seiji. The book was published by University of Hawai'i Press in November 2021 as part of their Hawaii Studies on Korea series. The volume makes a valuable contribution to the cultural contextualization of Eric Hobsbawm's and Terence Ranger's 1983 concept, Invented Traditions. Their seminal book drew attention to a range of traditions that were fairly new, but used reference to the past as a legitimizing tool. As such, invented traditions reveal more about the present and the political or cultural context that created them. If we consider invented traditions as present-based processes or practices, it is important to examine the who, the authorities, political bodies, or cultural actors that are the actual creators of traditions. Many of the chapters in our book highlight this agency and connect North and South Korean invented traditions to institutional power. For this reason, Andrew Jackson defines them in the introduction to this volume as monumental invented traditions, highlighting their potential to generate cohesion and unity in times of upheaval or transformation. The volume is divided in 4 sections. The first part, reimagining tradition, history, and religion. A second part dedicated to rewriting tradition, language. A third part entitled Consuming and Performing Tradition, Music, Food, and Crafts. And last part that I coordinated, Embodying Tradition, Spaces. You can find separate presentation videos for each of these sections and their chapters, while this particular video is a short introduction to the 4th part of the book, focusing on space. The section includes chapters by Robert Winston Leicesters and myself, Codruta Sintionean. Robert Winston Leicesters is a geographer and lecturer in human geography at the University of Leeds, Bath Spa University, and York St. John University, a teaching fellow in Korean studies at the University of Edinburgh, the managing editor of the European Journal of Korean Studies, and a member of Wolfson College, Oxford. Robert has authored several book-length publications on the politics and symbolic landscapes of North Korea. Robert's paper presents the fascinating case of the annual School Children's March, an event that was first seen in 2015. The state, the major creator and owner of traditions in North Korea, sends children to reenact Kim Il-sung's anti-colonial guerrilla fighting, his journey across the country to the northern border. This performance plays 2 roles. On the one hand, it is supposed to instill in citizens a sense of awe at Kim Il-sung's mythical bravery and repeat it in their everyday lives from an early age. On the other, the march is orchestrated as a spectacle to be recorded by the state media and then viewed by the entire nation. In this way, the march becomes a way of obliging all citizens to inhabit symbolic spaces and to emulate Kim's patriotic struggles by reliving them. What is striking in this invented tradition is that it entails a cynical paradox. The children, or any other citizen for that matter, can never cross the border to truly finish enacting Kim Il-sung's heroic quest. The children's journey must always stop at the border, always compelled to inhabit only the spaces allowed by the regime. The other paper in this section is my own. I am an assistant professor at the Department of Asian Languages and Literatures at Babeș-Bolyai University in Cluj-Napoca, Romania. I am researching South Korean heritage management practices with a particular focus on restoration and memorialization practices during the Pak Chong-gi era. My chapter examines how the Pak Chong-gi regime located tradition in a time that was no longer accessible, Joseon Dynasty, and sought to revive it in objects, places, and practices easily recognizable as Korean. The government crafted a selective definition of what constitutes traditional architecture by excluding the mundane, the modest houses of the common people, and focusing on the majestic architecture reflective of elite Joseon culture. The Office of Cultural Properties, the authority in charge of national heritage then, proceeded to apply this restrictive definition of tradition in remaking historic sites. The 1960s and particularly the 1970s witnessed a large number of restoration projects called purification projects. As the term suggests, the Office of Cultural Properties pursued a selection of aesthetic and architectural features that the government perceived as appropriate to embody both tradition and the national identity of a modern Korea, and proceeded to discard everything that did not fit this carefully tailored vision of the past. The papers in this section examine the functions of space and discuss the construction of orchestrated routes through South Korean historic sites and North Korean ideological landscapes. The significance of landscapes also originates in the fact that space or land is owned. So the invented traditions embodied in these spaces also belong to somebody, be it institutions or governments. But just as visitors, tourists, and martyrs often consume landscapes in an unconscious way, the creators of invented traditions and the agenda behind the making of space go unquestioned. When consuming invented traditions, tourists or citizens rarely examine their recent origins, and every form of consumption legitimates and reinforces the new practice. The agenda inherent in landscape and itinerary design is the same. First, to create a pretense of historicity, and second, to generate enough charisma to inculcate a feeling of respect and awe, even an attitude of worship towards the past. Both the South and the North governments have created invented traditions in order to legitimize their authoritarian regimes and have used space and ideologized landscapes to convey their agenda, appropriate narratives about the past, and to mold ideal citizens. Thank you.